What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video I want to showcase my favorite Prismatic Warlock build that I've been using. I actually used this to clear 4 of the 5 encounters of the Salvation's Edge raid.
Did we actually just complete this fucking encounter?
Let's fucking go!
I used this in every encounter up to the final boss fight against the Witness. And I just want to give a big thank you to everyone who watched me on YouTube and Twitch. It was my first time streaming. And yeah, thanks for tuning in and showing support, and I hope it was entertaining. And yeah, anyways, I just wanted to say thanks, but we'll get into the video. So my build centers around the exotic helmet Fellwinter's Helm. It has the armor perk Warlord's End, which states powered melee final blows create a burst of energy that weakens nearby targets. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the radius of the burst and the length of the weakening effect. So if you didn't know, this is like Tractor Cannon and a 30% weaken, which is obviously extremely strong, but it also suppresses, and Void Suppression can actually stun overloads.
Yeah, down here.
I'm going.
Yeah, overload on me. Oh, that fucking suppresses him. And jolts. Oh my god, this build is so good.
There we go.
So in the first encounter, there's Overload Minotaurs, and if I took out a group of ads, with a melee, then it would cause enemies around them to become suppressed, and this would actually stun the overload and weaken it by 30%, which is significant. So we were able to melt down those overload minotaurs really easy. So it's extremely strong, and I'll get into like how to make it so good. But first, I just want to talk about Fellwinter's Helm because I love how it looks. And I've always said that it's a very strong exotic, but it's held back by the crappy Warlock melees. Like Incinerator Snap is probably the only melee that's even decent for actually killing enemies with. But with Prismatic, this is why I was so excited to get this build. I knew this was going to be kind of the first build I made, so I just want to walk you through it. This is unscripted, so hopefully I don't like miss anything, but basically you need Arcane Needles, and the reason you want Arcane Needle is because you get 3 charges of them, and you're never using the Arcane Needle as the like melee you're dealing damage with. You're actually going to use the aspect Lightning Surge. So it says, while sliding, activate your charged melee ability to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt targets as you rematerialize. So here's kind of the crux with Fellwinter's Helm, is it's excellent in endgame activity because that's where you need the weaken and that extra damage that it provides. But in high-end activities, the melees can't get kills because Warlock melees are so weak, like I mentioned. But with Lightning Surge, now you have an extremely strong melee that actually can take out enemies in high difficulty activities. And I mean, there's not much more high difficulty activities than a contest day 1 raid, especially the Salvation's Edge. Like that was a pretty brutal raid, like in a good way. I love how difficult it was. But what I'm saying is Lightning Surge absolutely could shine, but if you try to run this on Arc, you only have like 1 melee ability, where this one gives you 3, plus Prismatic. Once you activate Transcendence, you get like crazy ability energy back, and you'll get your abilities back. So if I was ever out of my Arcane Needle melees, I could just activate Transcendence and boom, I have 3 more. Plus while I'm Transcendent, I'm able to just like spam the melee. So it's absolutely perfect for Prismatic. Like I can't stress how pumped I was to make this build. And I would actually switch some of the other things around. Like I ran some Void Grenades when I was testing out the build right before the raid. Like literally, I made this build 1.5 hours before the raid because I didn't unlock. I did most of my stuff on my Titan first because I had some Titan builds I wanted to try out, even though I only got to try out 1 because I was just pressed for time. So anyways, I unlocked that stuff, made this awesome build right before the raid, messed around with it in the Pale Heart a little bit, and it was absolutely shining. But yeah, I ran Void Grenades with it, or Vortex Grenades. Cold Snaps are really nice though, especially because they can like freeze enemies. Again, in higher end content, being able to freeze and lock down enemies is super crucial. And then anyways, the other thing I ran was Feed the Void. So I wasn't sure what would be the best aspect, but I figured Feed the Void would be, just because Devour is so strong. And as when we get to the fragments, there's certain ones where melee final blows like give ability, melee final blows give health back, health regeneration, but you don't need that if you're running Feed the Void. So like I said, I wasn't sure how everything would synergize perfectly until I actually got to test it. And in my opinion, this is the best version of the build. And you can mix and match certain things for certain activities. But like I said, I basically use this setup to get us through the first, or to help get us through the first 4 encounters of the raid during contest mode. So yeah, you want Feed the Void. If you don't know what it does, defeat a target with any ability to activate Devour. Your Devour effects are improved, restoring additional health and grenade energy. So Devour kind of got nerfed on the Void subclass with the one Fragment, where it would only give you half your health, but if you run Feed the Void, you get your full health back on kill, which was unreal in the raid because there's lots of enemies and you basically need a form of getting your health back. And then Lightning Surge, I already talked about like how great it is, especially on Prismatic. So like I said, you could kind of make this build on Arc if you wanted, but there's certain fragments that make it really, really strong on Prismatic, which I'm about to get to. So the other thing is the super. There's certain fragments that are tied to your super. So I ran Needle Storm for the most part, but you could also run Nova Bomb. It just comes down to what you want to run. So for fragments, the first one I had was Facet of Defiance. Finishers create a detonation that either jolts, scorches, slows, severs, or makes targets volatile based on the damage type of your equipped super. So again, I would either make them volatile or sever them because I ran Needle Storm or Nova Bomb. This is somewhat overkill. I don't know if I stressed enough. It doesn't have to just be a melee kill that you get. Finishers on the helmet also will do this effect. And when you finish like a more powerful target, it has an increased radius and lengthens the effect. So you actually want to get finishers. I'm not usually a fan of these fragments that are based around your finishers. Like on Arc, finishers make you amplified. That's useless because it's so easy to get amplified. But Facet of Defiance is actually really strong, especially with Fellwinter's Helm. Because, like I talked about, say I finish just a red bar ad next to that Overload Minotaur, now not only is it weakened, it's also severed, so when it comes out of its stun state, it's going to be doing 40% less damage to you. I think Sever is 40%. So extremely, extremely good to pair with Fellwinter's Helm, because there was lots of times in the raid when I was just trying to get a finisher, and then weaken everything around me and sever it. So it helps massively for survivability, which again, the Arc kit does not have something that strong. So Fellwinter's Helm and Prismatic just pair beautifully. Facet of Sacrifice, while you have an Arc, Solar, or Void buff, ability final blows grant bonus Darkness Transcendence energy. So this one is massive for your Transcendence cooldown because Arc, Solar, and Void buffs are things like Amplified, Restoration, I think Radiant as well, and Devour. So we always have Devour active pretty much with this build because as soon as we get a Lightning Surge kill, we have Devour, and then we just need a kill within 10 seconds to extend Devour. It also gives +10 to Discipline. Oh, sorry, it says on the left here. So light buffs include Amplified, Cure, Radiant, Restoration, Devour, Invisibility, and Overshield. So lots of different buffs you can get, and when we get to the artifact mods, you'll see how easy it is to get lots of them. So you're usually getting like jolt kills and whatever else, and just like melee kills from the Lightning Surge, so that's giving you light transcendence. And then this one gives you bonus darkness transcendence, which I was running some darkness weapons, like some strand weapons, so I was able to get it from there, but this is just a free way to get it just from doing your abilities that you're already going to be doing. So I highly recommend running this one. Facet of Defiance, the first one I talked about, not necessarily a must run, but it does have really nice synergy with this build and gives +10 recovery. But Facet of Sacrifice, in my opinion, is a must run because, as I mentioned, if you're out of melees, you can just pop Transcendence and then boom, you get your melees back. Facet of Dawn, powered melee hits against targets make you radiant. Powered melee final blows make you and nearby allies radiant. So again, this one isn't necessarily a must run, but it's such a free way to get radiant. And yeah, like 25% weapon damage bonus is massive, again, especially in like a day one raid. I'm not sure how this will hold up in GMs. It really depends on the structure of the GM. If it's really wide and spread out, then it's not going to be that good because you won't have much like cover to go and attack enemies. But in the day 1 raid, it was kind of perfect because especially like in the first encounter, you're running to like rooms that are full of ads that are just on you, but they're all bunched up. So your lightning surge can like take out so many of them. And then when you do that, so I mentioned, so you also have to kill big hydras, not just overload minotaurs. So you take out a bunch of enemies with your lightning surge. This makes you radiant, gives you devour, so you get your health back immediately if you took some damage as you were leading in to kill them. It's going to weaken everything around. So if you killed it near that minotaur or near the hydra, it's going to weaken the hydra and give you 25% radiant. And especially on that hydra, it's got the rotating shield, so it's really nice because then you have radiant, so you have anti-barrier on your weapons, so you could just burst through that shield. So I really love Facet of Dawn with this build. Is it a must run? Maybe not. You could maybe run other things that you want, and it does give -10 to strength, which hurts your cooldowns a little bit, but I think it's excellent, so I really liked running that. Facet of Balance, rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. So again, I talked about how your lightning surge is getting a ton of kills and they're rapid defeats. So then you're getting bonus melee energy. I don't know the percentages on this yet. I haven't checked the compendium to see if it's updated with like new prismatic cooldowns, but regardless, any free melee energy that we can get is absolutely awesome. And it's just rapidly defeating targets with light damage. So I was running like Sunshot sometimes. So if you're getting multi-kills with Sunshot, you're just getting free melee energy. And you want your melee up as often as possible with this build. And then the last one is Facet of Purpose. Picking up an Orb of Power grants either Amplified, Restoration, Frost Armor, Woven Mail, or Overshield based on the damage type of your equipped super. So again, I was getting Woven Mail most of the time. This was the biggest reason I ran Needlestorm, was for, well, other than the fact it's an awesome super, especially because it's like a quick one-off. So it was really good for taking out, again, things like the Overload Minotaur or these high health targets or whatever. So every time I would get an Orb of Power, I would get Woven Mail. And because this is such an aggro build, you really want that damage resistance. Void Overshield also gives you damage resistance, so it pairs nicely with Nova Bomb as well, especially, again, as we'll get to in the artifact mods. But yeah, Facet of Purpose, I would say pretty much is a must run. It does give you -10 recovery, but that DR was completely keeping me alive throughout the raid. So those are the fragments that I ran. You can kind of make your own determinations on if you want to swap some other ones in and out, but I think the reasons I gave for this build are pretty justified in why I ran them. And like I said, I tested it out in pretty much some of the hardest content Bungie's ever made, and it performed absolutely amazing. Like, people were in my stream chat asking me like what this build is. Yeah, anyways, it was awesome. And I'll talk about the stats really quick. So on my Warlock, I pretty much, all my armor is kind of spec to Resilience and Discipline. But in this build in particular, if you can swap out Discipline and get 100 Strength, that would be even better. I only had 60 Strength though, and my melee, there was only very brief times where I was like, oh shit, I don't have a melee. And then when I looked down, I was like 3 seconds away from having my melee energy back to do another lightning surge. So it wasn't like I was like really struggling, but again, those 3 seconds like would have made a difference with higher strength. So spec into 100 strength if you can, but obviously first is 100 resilience for that damage reduction and survivability, because this is such an aggro build. So yeah, that's the essence of the build. Now let's talk about the mods. Right now I have on like heavy-handed, ammo finder, and harmonic siphon. That's pretty much what I ran like the whole time because getting just free heavy ammo was nice. Hands-on, just bonus super energy for melee kills, which we're getting a ton of, so it's kind of a no-brainer. And then just harmonic siphon just because that's all I had room for. On the gloves, this one is crucial. You need heavy-handed. This is like a must run because your powered melee final blows create an orb of power. So I talked about with the fragments how picking up an orb of power grants either basically some type of DR when you pick up an orb of power. So when I was picking up an orb of power, I would get Woven Mail or Overshield. So basically you slide in, The most dangerous part of this build is getting that first kill, but Lightning Surge is really good at like getting into the fray kind of from a distance. So you slide in, you get that melee kill, it's going to drop an orb of power from Heavy Handed. This gives you Woven Mail so that when you come out, you're safe. But the other thing is Fellwinter's Helm is suppressing everything around you, like immediately near you that didn't die. So you're able to kind of just get out because they're not damaging you because they're suppressed. And if you did like a finisher instead of a melee final blow, then you're proccing Facet of Defiance so the enemies around you are severed. So when you get that first melee kill with Lightning Surge, you come out of it with Woven Mail and Radiant because it's a melee. And then if it was a finisher kill, you're also severing the enemies, and then everything around you is suppressed. So it's extremely, extremely strong. And then the other mods I ran were Momentum Transfer, causing damage with a grenade reduces your melee cooldown, and Impact Induction, causing damage with a powered melee attack reduces your grenade cooldown. So they would just kind of have a nice feedback loop, especially when you're Transcendent. Just whatever resistance mods you want on the chest piece. On the legs, I ran Invigoration, reduces melee or melee cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. So again, when you slide in and get that melee kill and Heavy Handed makes an orb, then you pick that orb up and you get a little chunk of melee energy. And then because I was doing a raid and lots of guys were like casting supers and this and that, there's no cooldown on this. So every time, so if I picked up like 10 orbs that my teammates had all made, I would get like so much melee energy back. It was incredible. Then Absolution reduces all ability cooldowns each time you pick up an orb of power. So just more ability energy back. And then Innervation reduces grenade cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. Like the amount of ability spam you have with this build is crazy. And then Distribution reduces all ability cooldowns when using your class abilities near targets. Outreach reduces your melee cooldown when using your class ability. So again, when I talked about how I was like 3 seconds off a melee, if I wanted, I could have cast a Rift or a Phoenix Dive. I was running Phoenix Dive for the majority of the time. And then I would just get a little chunk. And then Snapload Finisher, because we're not using any armor charges anywhere. So finishers, oh, this was the wrong one. This is finishers reload all your weapons. I meant to run 1-2 finisher. So that whole time I had the wrong thing on. But if you wanted to run 1-2 finisher, which is what I should have had on, finishers restore melee abilities, consumes 3 or more stacks of armor charge, granting additional energy for each charge consumed. So that additional part is just like if you were running stacks on your chest piece and you had like 4 to 6, you're just going to get even more melee energy. But I didn't have any of that. I had resist stuff on. But again, I'm not using my orbs anywhere else. So if I had 3 charges and then I did a finisher, which you're doing a lot because you're running a Fellwinter's Helm build, then you would just get more melee energy back. So you definitely want 1-2 finisher on the class item. And then for weapons, I love the call. You can see I have almost 600 enemies defeated on this Lead from Gold 1-for-all one. You can basically use this thing like a primary, especially if you have Lead from Gold. So this was excellent. And again, I mentioned how this gives me my Darkness Transcendence energy. I ran different weapons throughout the raid. I also used, I don't have it here, but Trespasser, the Arc Sidearm. I used that in the Vault encounter, the 4th encounter, and it was absolutely shredding. It's actually such a good sidearm. Exotic sidearms hit so hard. I had Sunshot, which is still very, very good, despite like a small nerf to its explosive damage. So yeah, anyways, or like its AoE. Sunshot's really nice. And then I had Cataphract, Envious Assassin, Bait and Switch. Again, in that first encounter, because there's Tormentors, I actually had on Doom Petitioner. So yeah, you can just run whatever weapons the activity calls for, but these were just some of the ones I was running. And the weapons you choose to run doesn't really matter, though I would kind of recommend Strand or Stasis. I also used Stasis. I used Deliverance, the Stasis Fusion Rifle in the Vault encounter for slowing enemies. And yeah, anyways, try to do some darkness weapons if you can, just for Transcendence, because again, once you're Transcendent, then you can really spam those melees and like clean everything up. And yeah, this build's just awesome. And then the last thing to look at is the artifact mods. So I'm not going to go really through all of them, but the ones that are kind of relevant, the first one is Radiant Orbs. So again, we've got the fragment that gives us radiant for melee hits, but radiant orbs, again, because we were in a day 1 raid, there were orbs kind of everywhere. So every time I pick one up, boom, I'm radiant for 10 seconds. Galvanic armor. So I talked about how woven mail gave me damage resistance. Well, galvanic armor gives you even more DR because while you have an arc or prismatic subclass equipped, incoming damage from combatants is reduced while amplified. So you're jolting these enemies with your lightning surge, so you can actually get amplified with this build, and then galvanic armor gives you even more DR. So like I said, the most risky part of this build was getting that first melee kill. Once you get that, you get the orb of power, so you have woven mail, you're amplified, so you have galvanic armor, and then you're just like a walking tank, and you're just weakening everything and killing everything with your lightning surges. It's crazy. Then expanding abyss, so I swapped to Nova Bomb for the second encounter with the boss, because void sources deal increased damage to weakened targets. So I talked about how it's a 30% debuff, the Fellwinter's Helm like finisher or melee kill proc. But if you're running void weapons, and again I said I had precision instrument on in the first encounter, then it's going to be a 35% debuff for your void weapons. And on top of that, like I said, you're also radiant, so that's 25% damage buff and a 35% damage weaken, because the Fellwinter's Helm weaken is not the traditional weaken, the 15%, it's the 30% kind. So there's this 30% increased damage to your void weapons. I had Argent Blade on for that second boss as well because we were running Falling Guillotines, so that was really good but again, if you're not running a sword, this one's useless to you. Shield Crush, so these ones, you just take your pick for depending what the heck your build is and your weapons are. So I was swapping these throughout the raid. Shield Crush, while you have Woven Mail, Frost Armor, or Void Overshield, and like I said, we pretty much always have Woven Mail or Void Overshield depending on our super, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. So again, once you get that first melee kill, now you're running around with Woven Mail or Void Overshield, so your melee is recharging faster and dealing increased damage. And then while you're amplified or radiant, again, both things that we can get from getting a melee kill, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. So if I was running cold snaps, the damage doesn't really matter, but I was able to just get my grenade more frequently. But if you were running vortex grenades, then it's even going to deal more damage. And the last one is Transference. So my general play one, I like to run Shield Crush and Transference. So gain increased grenade and melee damage while Transcendent. So again, then you're Transcendent, you're just chucking your grenade, you're doing your melees, and they're all doing even more damage. And then Weapon Final Blows while Transcendent refund light and dark energy. So I was actually using my weapons a lot while Transcendent, because I'd kind of like just slide in and get a melee kill to weaken everything, and then I would just deal a bunch of damage with my weapons. So it wasn't like I was just constantly spamming the melee, I was just using it to get a group of adds dead and then weaken everything around me, and then I was killing it with my weapons. So Transference is also unreal. So yeah, Shield Crush and Transference are what I prefer, again, for general play. And then, did I talk about this one? While you Void Hegemony, while you have a Void or Prismatic subclass equipped, defeating weakened targets provides a small Void Overshield. So again, we're weakening everything, and then when we defeat those weakened targets, we're getting an Overshield. So now we have Overshield on top of, so say we were running Needle Storm, so we have Woven Mail, Void Overshield, and Galvanic Armor from being amplified. So yeah, you have like 3 or 4 forms of like damage resistance, like because you're also getting damage resistance from 100 resilience. So like I said, this build is just a walking tank, and it's weakening everything. It looks sick as hell. Like Fellwinter's Helm has always been one of the coolest looking helmets in the game, and I've always wanted to make a build video with it. And I can see I've talked for almost 25 minutes about this build, so I'm sorry it was so long, but I just can't stop glowing about this build because it's incredibly strong. Like, I fucking love it, to be honest. It's probably going to be my go-to prismatic build, and yeah, like I said, it's proven itself in the hardest content. And I kind of talked about how it's kind of made for hard content, because weakening enemies that die to one shot in patrol doesn't really matter anyways, but where you want it is hard content. So in team GMs, this could be really good. I don't know if I'll be able to solo GMs with it, just because again, it really depends on getting that first melee kill, and you can just die really quickly in GMs. But in a team GM, where you can like tag stuff up, and if you die it doesn't matter, but you could like prep an enemy, get a finisher kill, and then just weaken and suppress everything around you. I would definitely recommend this in a team GM 100%, but in a solo GM it might be a little too aggro. We'll just have to see. I might give it a try. But anyways, that's it for the build. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. There'll be a dim link below so you can copy what I have. Again, the weapons doesn't really matter. It's what you want to run. But the stuff that I talked about for the actual build of it, I wouldn't really swap too many things out. Like I said, it holds up really, really well. And I think, like I said, I gave very justified reasons for running the fragments that I did run. So anyways, that's it for the build. Thanks for watching and take care.